So this is the session I guess everyone's been waiting for, the most candid that anyone can get, and who better than Dr. Nassim Taleb right here with us. We also have Birla from Birla AMC as the grand finale for today. Nassim, as you like to call yourself, good to see you.
Thank you for call me by my name.
I met you in December. I remember from there.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So while we're all smiles here, Nassim, but we all know that this is a very tough environment. At least in my living life, I've not seen a situation where I've been asked to stay at home, we're eating different, we're working different, we're earning different, or soon will be, who knows, I hope not. And we're just living different. Would you say that this is one of those Black Swan Part 2 that's playing out right now?
It is. Well, the reason I said it was not a black swan is because, unlike September 11, it was not unexpected. You see, it was something that was the spot of the system, and these pandemics, just that people were paying attention. And the second thing I'd say about the black swan is that what is a black swan for person A is not necessarily a black swan for person B. And the example I give is September 11 was not a black swan for the perpetrators, for the terrorists, but it was a black swan for the victims. Otherwise, they wouldn't be victims. So it depends on your set of information. So someone aware of pandemics will understand what's going on. It would have been a white swan. The problem is a lot of people understood pandemics, but never imagined really that it could hit them home. And then I would say it's somewhere between a black and a white swan, depending on your actions are like as if it were a black swan, but your mind is acting as if it were a white swan.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
so would you say?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
So we have. I mean, when you think of history, we tend to think history as something linear, and these events are predicted. You know, follow, like in a novel, or things sort of you can figure them out. No, history is mostly events like this, okay, that change the game, and change our perception of the world, force us to revise what's going on, and you have huge winners and you have huge losers and you have rotation, and that's what history is, and that's one historical event. This is a huge historical event. Now we're going to have a big spate of losers, not just economically, but politically. And politically, in a sense, like globalists, I mean, not globalists, people who think in terms of geopolitics. Nobody cares. People are now deprived of masks and testing in America, the most powerful country in the world, but you have nuclear weapons. That makes no sense, you see? So you have a just complete transformation. We're no longer this is not the Vienna, the Vienna after the post-Napoleonic Vienna Convention, where people think in terms of states. No, we got to think in terms of humans, and the big enemy is something that is collectively less than a gram, or a gram and a half.
The unknown enemy. That's what
Exactly.
It is. The invisible enemy. But tell me,
Exactly.
Whoever we speak to say that this is a fight against the unknown enemy, the invisible enemy versus humanity. Is humanity right now, in your reading, in its kind of a magnitude, if I can call it that, you think humanity will win? Has science evolved that much?
I mean,
have economies, have politicians, have thinkers evolved to be able to come out of this alive and strong?
Well, what I would say is that modernity doesn't understand these events, but classical thinking does. I mean, pandemics are very common in history. Not only they're common in history, but I mean, if you see that the plague lasted several hundred years. The plague wasn't one episode, like in a movie and then ends. All right, it lasted. It came back in 1750. It came back even now. You still get once in a while an episode of plague in California. So the people have lived ever since we've had settled civilization. We had to deal with pandemics, with epidemics, and eventually a few pandemics. The problem we have today is we built a world that cannot withstand the shock of these pandemics, and we have, instead of changing pandemics, we won't be able to. we have to change the way we, are structured. Okay, the way we are structured, the ability to constrain travel, the ability to go back to quarantines. Quarantines are very old. I mean, you've had, if you take ancient Mediterranean cultures, this is common since Babylon, right? I mean, having to fight diseases and what you do and prescription. So, and it was extremely well implemented during the Renaissance, in Italian cities. So it was well documented. So what I'm saying is that we thought we were different, living in an exceptional era. It turned out we're just as vulnerable as others, if not more, because genes travel faster. We need to adapt to that. And that's the enemy number one. Now, you're asking me, will medicine win over it? I hope, but I'm not banking on it. Don't bank on it, because I don't know if you see the succession of cures that we've had, pseudo cures that we've had for all manner of viruses. They come and go. They come and go. We still haven't conquered, a lot of viruses. We could probably now we can control, HIV. AIDS, but you cannot kill the virus.
Absolutely. Bala, I would invite you to really come and analyze at this point with Nassim as to how economies world over will change post-COVID.
Yeah, just Nassim, just for your information, the people who are logged in are the people who run the large businesses coming from metal, cement, apparel, financial services business in India, and they also have wider interest in international market, operating in carbon black and many such businesses. We also have ex-policy makers and economists part of this today's audience. I think your view on post COVID-19, how the world economy is going to change. I think you mentioned about in your anti-fragile book. I just repeat the word that you have used: things that can gain from disorder or something benefit from shocks, goes beyond robustness and resilience versus anti-fragile. I think it seems to be that today we're in a scenario where resilience does not mean that something can be successful. I think if you can just give an overview as to how the world is going to change post the COVID-19, could be useful for everyone.
I mean, the first thing we're discovering now, again, as I said, are vulnerabilities. Okay, we're discovering the vulnerabilities. Okay, so we're better off than we were before, and we're so lucky we didn't get the big one. You know what the big one is? It's not a small virus. It is an antibiotic-resistant bacteria coming from hospitals where they breathe and ravaging, and definitely, and more even like the smallpox was a virus that was very contagious. This is very contagious. You can be more contagious and you can be more ravaging. So we were lucky with this one. Although we still don't know, we're not out of the woods as far as the morbidity. Okay, those who get it, we don't know how they'll fare and survive. They'll fare in the future, and we have indication that they won't fare very well. About the 6 of people who get something, like either fibrosis or impaired cardiovascular system, or even frostbites. Okay, and these come largely from your reaction to COVID rather than from COVID itself. So we still have to figure out how bad this is. But I tell you, it's not as bad as the, it could have been worse with the smallpox. Now, the world is better. Why? Because every time a plane crashes, and this is why I wrote an anti-fragile, the next plane ride is safer. It's very bad news, but we have learned how to deal with this because we did not learn from Ebola. We did not learn from SARS, the first one. We did not learn from the MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. We learned from this one finally. And it's too bad because we should have known from the other ones how to cut the losses early. And now as it's turning out, we're cutting the losses way too late. And you know what happens when you cut the losses too late, you see. In the United States. India, of course, cut the losses early. It's another story. So Is the world better off based on this? Yeah, because we're living in an illusion of safety, and now we discovered how things work, and we're going to be safer, in my book, than we were before. The second point, a lot of people talk GDP growth. Okay, now GDP growth is like taking a bank, you give loans and saying, oh, this is going to be my income. You once in a while, you have to make a reserve for someone going bust. So we're talking about GDP growth without setback, without an allowance for fragility that we just paid for. So in the future, we'd be wiser. We'd say, okay, we're going to have 2-3% growth, but once in a while, we're going to pay, a point of growth, 2 points, 5 points of growth once in a while. So the net growth will be lower than what is stated. So people will start to understand the real world today.
Sure. We were just drawing up a list of the countries which have pumped up stimulus into the economy to try and fight the pandemic cost, which has been huge on industries, on the overall economy, etc. Japan pumping in almost 20% of their GDP as the deficit, as the stimulus, I beg your pardon. India just day before announced a package as large as 10% of the GDP. In this kind of a scenario wherein you've got the Fed pumping in whatever it takes, just last night you heard from Jerome Powell as well that we will need more. So who knows, maybe Fed will print more money. In this kind of a scenario, what's looking fragile to you? And is this the right approach to print money and pump into the economy?
Okay, no. So the thing I've said, and I've been saying it for 13 years, the way government should operate is by building reserves, just as your grandmother told you, okay? You build reserves for a bad day, okay? And we know that from the Bible, okay? You have 7 years and then 7 years. So you build reserves in a fat years for the bad years, okay? Now, since the Second War, government stopped doing it. Okay, so why? They hired economists who think they know better. So now we end up not having reserves, so we have to borrow. That's not a very enviable situation. So it's not wrong
Nassim,
that we're doing stimulus.
I must interrupt you. There are a lot of economists as well in the audience, so think before you speak.
No, they're the good economists in the audience. They're the good economists, not the American. Okay, anyway, so they have taught us that to borrow, okay, and the government's to borrow. Well, it's very nice. The problem is we destroyed all that redundancy that you should have had, and that's what happened in that culture that has developed everywhere in the West. Hey, borrow, okay. So we're hitting a crisis without a buffer. You see, your grandmother wouldn't have approved of it.
Absolutely not. But just picking up from what Birla was asking you as to how the world will change, how various sectors would change, India has always been known as the domestic consumption economy. Now, the problem here is that we're going to consume very different. There's going to be cost rationalizations because there is loss of jobs. Salaries are going to be cut. We're not going to travel out. We're all working from home. I've been working from home. I never thought that I could broadcast live, anchor a live television show out of my living room. But, we're all doing things out of the box. We're all thinking differently, and we're all figuring out ways to survive. In that context, how do you think the patterns of consumption are going to change in the post-COVID world?
Okay, again, I'm not a specialist of that. I mean, I deal with risk, not economics, but I can answer, within what I know, the things I've thought about. Is that every crisis will have a winner and a loser, okay? Now, this conference is a winner. Wouldn't you say so? Would that conference have taken place if it weren't for Zoom? COVID or no COVID? No. So there are things that are produced by the environment, okay, that they are winners. So what happens is that you got to look at industries and classify them in 3 categories, okay? The first category is industries that are benefiting hugely from this, and will not and will lose back if there is normalcy. Okay, which I doubt will happen immediately. Even if there is normalcy, people will be paranoid, but still. So that's the first class of industry. The second class of industries that have been destroyed by this, okay, and may or may not come back if there's normalcy. That's travel. And the third one is the robust industries, okay, industries that are weakly affected by this, okay, and that will bounce back, to go back to normalcy later. Like, for example, a dentist, or there's things that will have to come back. So these are the three classes of industries. To that, okay, of course, we may have, when you look at India, what are the industries you have that are thriving, may boom from this, okay? But think about it, the world have learned now. For example, I take very casually that my doctor wanted to examine me for a checkup on Zoom. Okay, I mean, so why should I pick an Indian doctor? You go, India has huge doctors. Maybe they pick the best Indian doctor. It's gone to Zoom, all right? Is there more geography? If there's no geography, and this I mentioned earlier in my thought, if they broke the geography, then you guys have some areas that have huge advantage over others, either because you can produce things at lower cost, or because you can have the best person available for that. So the world effectively, that's one thing that would benefit. That's one industry that benefit from the crisis. That's the first one. The second one is what's happening with, when we talk about printing, you got to imagine that most people are afraid of printing money in many countries because they're afraid for their currency debasement. You see, when people think in dollars. But now it's turning out that the mother of all printing is taking place where? United States and Europe. So it allows you to print with some impunity, you see? So it allows you to engage in some policies that normally would result in higher interest rates for you, you see, because people are afraid of inflation and stuff, okay? Because you're not one of the reference, or at least not yet a reference currency. And then that allows you to engage in some actions. All right, that's one other thing. And then finally, one thing about India that is quite powerful is India acted early and wisely to this COVID. So the economic costs for India are lower than they would have been otherwise, and definitely lower than they are for the United States. And I think of the United States, we're still, this half measure here and there is causing us now, we're still, not flattening the curve. We're afraid of resurgence, and we have social problems now with all these disagreements between people, and coming into an election year with militias, carrying weapons because they don't want to wear masks in stores. I mean, this is not happening in India. So you're much less punished by what's going on by the virus than we are in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. We went in for an early lockdown, and I think that was the most sensible thing to do. We have an economist. Guess what? Ajit Ranade is on the line with us as part of the audience. Yes, and before I go to him and ask him to take the questions, I would request all of you, whoever has a question, just click on the hands up button on your, your Zoom screens, and our moderators will point to us, and we will take up your questions. So do keep sending us your questions. We will take all your questions with Nassim today. We've got him on a good day. He's in Atlanta under quarantine, or rather lockdown. So we will get him to answer all of our questions. But Ajit Ranade, go ahead, ask your question to Nassim, please.
Thank you, Aisha, and thanks, Bala, for inviting us. Mr. Nassim Taleb, nice to see you. We are welcoming you for the second time, at least, I think. Happy to have attended your talk in Mumbai, I think, a couple of years back. Since you said it's good to see you, I think you have the same beard. We are now in a new.
We have similar beard. We have similar,
yes. The lockdown.
Lack of hair, yes.
Actually,
lucky you guys.
This is a new.
You don't have to spend on haircuts. You don't have to worry about haircuts.
I worry about the barber business, going down. Anyway, so Mr. Taleb, you mentioned that you are a specialist on risk. We all know, of course, about you as a great, one of the world's leaders on risk. So the pandemic risk is what we are currently sort of experiencing, or the outcome of that. But there's another big risk that the world faces, which is climate change. And the people who've been talking about it for many, many years, they felt that they have not been able to convince the world about that risk. Even though in Paris there was a celebratory signing of the big treaty, and the US, which did not sign the treaty back in Kyoto Protocol, was very much enthusiastic. In fact, there was a great signing ceremony where President Obama and President Xi Jinping were early signatories to the Paris Protocol. And of course, India was very enthusiastic as well. In fact, India is very aggressive about its targets on renewable energy and solar energy and all. So the question I wanted to ask you is, because you are I consider you as a futurologist as well, apart from being a risk.
Okay.
That's why we all ask about questions about the future, because that's where we intend to live, as they say. But so how do we think about the climate change risk? We are on in lockdown, we are experiencing the pandemic, but this is a good time to think about the other big risk that the world faces, which is climate change.
That's great. So the same group collaborators with whom I've been writing scientific papers on pandemics, urging early action. The same group, we wrote something on climate change at some point, and then it was as follows: there are nonlinearities in responses by nature, and let me explain. If you cut down your emissions by 10%, you're reducing the total risk by 35%, for example. I mean, I'm just making up, the numbers are the same, similar, but not precise. So we have, and what's happening here, where we did cut down emissions during that period, and then we will observe a nonlinear benefit from it. Okay, like, and in reverse, is, say, for example, if I take a little bit of arsenic, it doesn't affect me. If I take more, maybe. If I take slightly more, I die. It's the same nonlinearity that nature was experiencing with the pollution. So if I dump less stuff in the atmosphere, necessarily, and then we explained it, why it's a necessary property of things, why nature is not adversely affected by the first batch, the second batch a lot more, and the third batch a lot more. The idea of so therefore, I would say that the drop in airline travel, I mean, you can see it in the price of oil. That drop in airline travel has been monstrously beneficial, you see, in terms of nature, the gains that we have. Okay, plus there's another thing going that again, to generalize, we like very simple to identify that most problems come from very few things. Like this virus doesn't come from everybody, contaminating everybody. It comes from super spreaders mostly. You see, just like we have super spreaders. Okay, actually, you have super spreaders, disproportionately contributing to the transmission of COVID. You have super polluters, if I want to say, the marginally are the ones messing things up, and that drop is going to improve. And we think that cars, for example, car traffic is moving so fast towards electric cars simply because of demand and also because of efficiency. It's cheaper to drive, even with oil prices here. It's cheaper to drive an electric car. It's cheaper to have one factory, even if you depend on oil, one factory producing energy, all right? And then you dump that energy into your car rather than have every car as a small factory of energy, which is highly inefficient. So they were, even without this, there were, things coming up, 300 models of cars, electric cars. I don't know how many will survive this crisis, but enough of them in the works, coming, over the next 10 years. So the switch to electric would have been sufficient, I think, to dampen. We'll still use oil, but it'd be less dangerous. So it's exactly as if, when I fall, and I explain it in Anti-Fragile, if I fall 5 meters, I'm going to hurt myself. But if I jump 2 meters, no. You see? So that nonlinearity is present in this, and I think that both the effect of COVID, people traveling less, and the effect of the independently that was working, that switch to electric cars, I think is helping.
Nassim, I have a few questions which also come from one of the ex-central banker. I'll just read out this question. When we talk globalization, going into retreat, at least as everyone believes, almost everyone refers to trade globalization. But we have financial globalization, which is bigger and more ferocious. Do you think both will go into retreat, or we'll have a new world order that addresses the issue of concentration, risk, and also set standards for various facets of life that are interconnected, as you are only as good as the weakest link in an interconnected world?
I see. Okay, so the point is that we discovered sorely in the 80s. Everybody wanted to do financial diversification, and they thought of financial globalization allow you to diversify your risk, and progressively we start realizing that whatever people invest in start moving in lockstep. So you're thwarting that diversification simply because everybody's doing it. So we had that effect in the 80s. That's what you mean by like moving into diversification led to globalization and finance that led to things moving in lockstep. Yeah, that's a negative impact. But now at the same time, that financial globalization and economic globalization, in my opinion, are here to stay. We can't do anything about it. The fact that I am in Atlanta and you are in
Mumbai.
Exactly the opposite side of I'm having morning coffee and you're having evening coffee. So the fact that we are on opposite side and then discussion shows you that there is effectively you cannot reverse globalization, even if you stopped masks from going cross borders. Okay, so there's another thing also I want to say about globalization, the lack of globalization. It's the imprecisions of the words used. How some people who say I'm anti-globalization or pro-globalization. Now, nobody is really anti-globalization, right? Because nobody wants to live off of her or his garden, okay, in autarky. And nobody is for 100% globalization in the sense that there's no more nationalities, we do whatever, okay. So or there may be some, but they're small. But everybody is somewhere, okay, between 68% and say 72%. So it's a matter of small details that go up. Like some people are saying, okay, yes, we can import stuff from China, but we don't want to import pharmaceuticals, okay? Some people say, so what I think is the degree of globalization will still be there. And as a matter of fact, it may even accelerate. What will happen is that we'll have circuit breakers to try to separate things, to make things, to put buffers. Okay, circuit breakers, for example, you can produce anything you want in China, but not some critical items. All right, the 5G maybe no, but you can do other things. So people will start trading this, and in financial globalization, you may let now we can control. You may let people invest anywhere they want outside the country. Remove capital control. I don't think capital controls can come back because it's practically impossible to enforce them. Okay, now that the money is outside and the state capabilities are not as good as our abilities to find contracts to do these things, and you cannot divorce so much economic globalization from financial globalization. So I think. That even if they try to do capital control, you still will have financial globalization, people moving across. If there's an opportunity in Malaysia, and I'm sitting in New Jersey, okay, I will be able to find my way there, okay? So there will be some, to me, we're advancing, and we're going to have some benefits of globalization, financial globalization, without some of the clustering that we had in the past.
Sure. Yeah. I have one question from a very big domestic investor. And Akash Bhanshali has sent in his question. He's first of all greeted you saying, hi, Nassim. He wants to know, what is your view on the US dollar with the US Fed bloating its balance sheet to nearly $10 trillion and the US debt to GDP around 120%? What is your view on the strength of the dollar in the medium as well as the long term?
Okay, so I have, as I say, I tell you what I do, all right? I own dollars because I'm in the States. And I tell you exactly what I do is I try to reduce my exposure to dollar. So I hate gold, as I repeat from last session. I said I hate gold, but I own some. Okay.
You said you own a gold mine. That's different. Than
No. I also own gold. I also own gold. I mean, I'm exposed to gold. I also have convexity on all of mine. Mining stock, but I also own gold, right? Because you can trade in and out of it with more liquidity. But I hate gold, all right? I own foreign currencies as much as I can, but now one thing you got to keep in mind is all the alternatives to the dollar are doing the same thing. You see, so whether Europe, Europe will always end up having about roughly the same quantitative easing, although Germany will always remind you of Weimar. Okay, they talk about Weimar every day, but they just do it as a procedure. In other words, they'll let quantitative easing happen big time in Europe and printing money. So we're talking about dollar versus other currencies or dollar versus other items. We can see gold is firm. Bitcoin, I mean, is very volatile, so cannot really be used as a metric for anything, but you can see demand go there. So there is some flow into Bitcoin, into cryptocurrencies. And there's some flow into silver and other metals, not huge. I think, okay, when you tell me, is this a dangerous strategy? I'd say for now we have deflation. They can do whatever they want and still no big impact. It's later on that will start getting punished for it. And Japan has been doing it for a long time and managed to survive. Doesn't mean it's a good strategy, no, but it means it can take a long time before you're caught. And it will be a different staff. It's also an optimal strategy for employees today of the Federal Reserve and current people in office, because the result of their action will be so far delayed into the future that they don't have to worry too much now about failure. But for now, the problem again is they have no choice. They have no choice but to do it. Almost every other country is doing something like that. Almost every other country can afford it. Okay. And almost, and they, and that we're paying the price for bad policy in the past, not having reserves for rainy days.
Sure. So are you saying that in the long term, also the strength in the US dollar is going to continue?
I do not predict. I tell you what I have, right? I would like the dollar to be strong because my exposure to the dollar, but I'm hedged for a large share of it. Okay, or some share of it. I would like it. Plus, the risk today of someone switching to another reserve currency is quite low. It may happen later, but it's still quite low now. So they can afford to print. I don't know if and we really don't know about this. First, making a projection based on what's going on now is not a good idea, because we can't really see what's going on. We don't know about this virus. It may end tomorrow and we'll have an economic boom. There's a small probability it may happen, or it may linger, keep coming back, false alarms with medicine, false hope with false hope. This works, this doesn't work, this so on. So we may be dragged for a long time. So I don't know, and I don't know how the United States would be affected compared to other countries, because we're still not out of the woods compared to a lot of other countries.
Right, Bala, you have a question?
Nassim, Nassim, I have Mr. Satish Pai, who is a managing director of one of the largest producer of aluminum, low-cost producer of aluminum in India. And incidentally, they also have a unit in Atlanta supplying aluminum can to Pepsi and Coke. And he has some questions for you. Satish Pai.
Hi, Nassim. So,
Hi.
With this crisis going on, whether we like it or not, there is a geopolitical crisis going on in the background. So
Yes.
my question really is that, we came out of many years of Cold War between Russia and the US, and it was fought on military type of Cold War. So is the world heading towards another Cold War, this time with China replacing Russia? And, countries like India, which the last Cold War, we tried to play it out as non-aligned. And this time, we are sort of sitting right on the border of China and wondering what to do. So what is your view on the sort of political risk of another Cold War shaping up here right in front of our noses?
Okay, I would say I'm not worried. One, because analogies don't work through historical thing. Cold War is not a natural state of affairs, you see. And then also, with the Russians, it was very easy to have a Cold War because they didn't need, or at least except for wheat, they did not need the West. And they thought, they did not need the West. And to be honest, the West did not need it too much. Okay, also, so it was a narrative that worked at a time, and it was exceptional. Today we live under globalization. Okay, whether we want it or not, and it's irreversible. You see, so you cannot have this is made in China. This will continue to be made in China. Okay, because there's absolutely no national security problem in having this glass made in China. The quality is improving in China, and the American consumer cannot be deprived of the big discounted item you find at Costco. So the American consumer decides. Now, geopoliticians, if anything, are the losers of that story. You see, the geopoliticians are losers of that story because geopoliticians try to view the world in terms of conflict between nations. Okay, and it's turning out that we have here is not a conflict between nations, but a conflict between two biological items, human beings and a virus. Okay, for which we're ill-equipped, and we spent so much money on the other war. So it is so transparent that people are seeing it today. So it is obvious that so maybe the U.S. government wants to have problems with China. Okay, it will hold much less water for business people. If China produces this, okay, better and cheaper than the United States, and there's no particular reason, to prevent them from selling it here, I think the product will find their way here. So as they say, when goods cross borders, armies don't. You see, so I mean, okay, Cold War is halfway between war and peace. To me, it's an accident in history. Never happened before in history. It's not normal to have that. We have, and then again, if you notice, the Chinese are merchants. Okay, the Silk Road people are merchants. If you see Chinese and all these countries around the Silk Road, they're not war. Even I mean, the conquest for many of the stories that happened in Central Asia was mostly to secure a good passage for merchants. So they're not they're too wise. The Chinese are too wise to engage in any form of conflict with the United States, and the American consumer is too wise to put geopolitics before their economic interest. What we may have is what I call the circuit breakers, is a little bit of, some things you can't sell here. So what? No big deal.
Actually, we have, of course, Mr. K.K. Maheshwari, who has run business like textiles, cement, and one of the veteran in Indian market, part of Hezbollah Group. And if you have any questions, can you, Mr. Maheshwari, can you ask any questions if you have anything?
I think, Bala, you please go ahead with others.
Okay. Thanks there. We also have Tata Consultancy is one of the largest market cap company in India. They're providing the best software solution to the world. And I have Mr. Venkat, who is the head of large pool of treasury that he handles. He has a question for you. It comes in admin Shiv. It comes in admin name.
Good evening. See, in fact, every year, earlier crisis resulted in more and more risk management practices, either enhancement or new practices getting into operation. Okay. In fact, mostly it was tightening of the existing practices. Okay. But however, this COVID-19, I can say that it is a crisis more of the business continuity. Okay. What is? I just want to have your view on the technology, what the technology is going to play. Is going to take a larger leap, and especially now almost all the companies, at least I can say technology companies have started working from home. Okay, I just want to have your view on this one, view on technology.
Okay, so there's we are very lucky, and let me explain. As there's an Israeli gentleman who told me in the beginning of this, he said, God gives you the cure and then gives you the disease. So we got the internet and the web, and then we got COVID. Think about it, that without the internet, where we would be today. Had this COVID happened in 75, or you may say in 75, we're not as connected, so it wouldn't be as generalized. So we have technology is proving now to be central, okay, and has penetrated people's lives in ways it has never done before, namely family meetings on Zoom, events taking place on Zoom. I mean, all kind of lecturing on Zoom. So I think what's happening here, and I can see it in my own businesses, all right, but I can see it that any work you could do from home from now on, COVID, no COVID, you're going to do it from home. But why? It's more convenient. Okay. And then meeting face-to-face or going to the office will be for things that are either of social nature, or maybe because you get too bored at home, or maybe sometimes you like to see people in 3 dimensions rather than 2 dimensions. So it looks like, so this will definitely prop up, the winners are the providers of this, like for now Zoom, but it can be like Alta Vista versus Google, some other, the Google of Zoom may enter with a better product. So we have a switch away from universities, because anything that was fragile and not built properly before and can be replaced by technology will be replaced by technology. And I think the biggest sector affecting us here is education. It may not be a problem in other countries. In Europe, education is vastly more efficient than here. But that would be definitely, an area that is the technology in which will win. But we don't realize how much of GDP will switch to these things that are technological. So you have a big switch out of commercial real estate into technology companies, out of commercial real estate even into your house, because your house is more adapted. So people can have a little bit bigger home because they're going to have a room, like I have a studio here, okay? Have a room where they can conduct these meetings, a specialized room. So it would be the wedge between commercial real estate and residential will increase. So they are, one can draw a list of winners and losers. Haven't done it, but in my opinion, there's things that are irreversible. There'll be some permanent winners, and the permanent winners are the companies that can operate both ways, both in physical space or like this without too much impediment, or can have a cocktail of both. They have the option of having a physical presence. So, and education, and as I said earlier, there are places that make the word flatter for you, because in the education domain or in medical domain, a lot of things, anything that takes place via technology and doesn't have borders, okay, you have huge advantage. where you have a manufacturing cost that is lower, and I'm sure you can, instead of you going to your doctor who's going to be second rate, maybe in the neighborhood here, I take the first rate Indian doctor, right? I wanted tutorance then for my children, since I'm going to be doing it online, instead of doing it with some second-rate person in the neighborhood, I can find someone, and odds are it's going to be, can be in India. So we're crossing borders for many products that favors, via technology that favors those who have the skills, no matter where they are on the planet.
Nassim, I have one question from Sandeep Gurumurthy. He used to be part of ET Now earlier, and he used to interview a lot of people like you when he was a journalist. And his question is, do we run the risk of overreacting to the crisis, preempting shifts that may not happen? And Disneyland Shanghai tickets earlier this week got sold out in minutes. And do you think we're all making too many assumptions on the world changing dramatically?
No, I don't think we're making too many assumptions, because the world did change dramatically. I mean, the fact that we have the world did change dramatically. And you can look at the switch in employment, okay? There's a switch in employment. There's entire sectors that have been decimated and may or may not come back. City like New York City, where I spent the last 35 years of my life, New York City is not going to recover, because New York City is based on theaters, restaurants, opera houses, concert houses, and games. And conventions. That's not gonna, that's it. It's just New York City will take a while, have to reinvent itself. So a lot of things have changed dramatically. And then of course our social life has changed dramatically. Now, of course, can we say that things that would be business as usual? Yeah, if we return from this, there'll be a lot of things that be business as usual, but the scar will always be there. And let me tell you why something can change with it, because you cannot reverse what happened. Because people will have in mind the next pandemic, you see? So people will act, so the warning we have today, because people will wake up, okay, thinking of the next pandemic for a long time. They will act. For example, I want to build a building. I'm not going to have large elevator. I'm going to have 3 small elevators. These changes. Why? Because for the next pandemic, even if this one is solved, I'm saying even if. So there are things. But in my thing, the big winner in this is the individual who will. In the West, for example, India is not obsessed with wars like the United States, and we're spending all this part of GDP on war to realize that it's the wrong war. Okay, it's like you're engaging all your energy in the wrong war. That also changed. I don't think anybody would give money to the military for a foreign threat, no matter how much people try to scare them, because your real enemy is not some foreign country. Your real enemy is something picked up at a bar.
Yeah. Thanks, Nassim. I think a lot of questions are coming. I have a question from Saini. Of course, he has posted his question, and I'll ask him to unmute and let him ask this question. Shiv, can you unmute Saini now?
So my question is a little bit related to, the nations and the politics and all that is going on around the world. So what I want to understand, obviously, this is unprecedented times in the modern world. So, and obviously, different nations are taking different policies, prioritizing different activities in different times. So what I want to understand your view in terms of in the coming times when, let's say, the nations have dealt with the issue around COVID-19, when the curve is under control and everything, what will be the priorities that the countries will start focusing on more in the coming times? And what do you think will take a back seat? So like if I come to think about it, maybe healthcare is something of a priority which will come up. Or will climate change and things like defense spend, those are the kind of things which will take a back seat. So how do you think that can shape sort of global policies and how countries see themselves in the world?
Okay. Yeah, before I answer, let me make one interesting comment about healthcare. It seems to me that one of the most heavily hit negatively industries in America is healthcare.
Yeah.
Because they canceled all elective surgeries, and that's where the money is for doctors. All right, they're not going to make money on your virus thing. They make money on some aesthetic surgery or some surgery you don't need or stuff like that. That's a lot of the money goes there. So strangely, a lot of the drop in GDP coming from ironically from revenues and from hospitals. You know, making less money outside. Okay, so again, I mean, we would say if we pulled out of COVID, I mean, it's like, I don't think like that because I'm not the forecaster. I'm someone who makes decisions based on what's optimal today, based on my information today. So I think by the time we get to overcoming COVID, what will be the priority of governments? They may make mistakes. Like, for example, if a government in the United States props up universities, would be making a mistake rather than letting the system correct itself and recreating its own universities online with some kind of physical, once in a while, meeting. But so I don't know. I don't know what's going to be the action. I know the mistakes people can make when we come out of this. I don't know what are. I mean, it depends how we pull out of it. If we pull out of it in 2 weeks, is one thing. If we pull out of it, and if it takes us a while to pull out of it, there'll be a lot of problems getting there. So it'll be mostly fixing these problems coming. Now we have huge unemployment in America. It's mounting. And the job of the government is going to be to just make sure not to give incentives to people after the jobs come back to stay unemployed, because you have a unemployment rate like in Europe that comes from the policy itself. Let me make a remark that how much the world has changed unexpectedly. Nobody ever thought that socialism would come to America with the Republican Party and Donald Trump, but that virus brought socialism to America, because these measures taken today to protect people's income, salaries, and the government giving loans to companies, this is textbook socialism. Okay, the only difference is the government doesn't have ownership of the company and isn't putting civil servants on the board yet. But so that is a change of scenery that's not reversible. You see, it's not easy to reverse this. So this, to me, this is where when people say the world won't change, the world has changed. Donald Trump brought socialism, reluctantly, of course, to America. And we'll get something out of this that people don't know we're going to get, is this makes a case for guaranteed basic income here.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, because basically we have guaranteed basic income. And there were a lot of plans in the works, different, and I'm sure the idea will have more credence, and the world will change, because the minute you have universal income for people, their whole risk attitude will change. A lot of things will change. The world is going to be very different.
Thanks, Nassim. I think we have gentleman Amit from HSBC. He has a question for you. Amit, can you go ahead?
Pleasure and honor
Hi,
to
Amit.
meet you, Dr. Taleb. Just a few quick questions on, you said the world is basically going to change, and it's changed for good. One of the largest questions that we've all sort of seeing is with this money printing press that's going on, are we finally going to see the dollar and the demise of the dollar? Obviously, there's no other alternate currency to the world today. And we understand that, this is a problem that we find ourselves in. But as emerging markets are all sort of starving of dollars, how far do you see this problem sort of, elongating? And then also, is there an alternative to the dollar? Because everyone's talking about gold as an alternative debasement. And again, we just want to get your views. But again, it's a pleasure and honor to meet you, sir.
Okay, great. So since the 90s, you know, when they started the euro, people have been talking about alternatives to the dollar. Basket of currency this, basket that. So I can say that the past 20 some years, I've heard nothing but alternative to the dollar, and no alternative has taken place. Okay, and once you have an announcement, and now oil, we're gonna not bill it in dollars. Okay, so, no, the alternatives to that have not bitten. If you say, okay, gold has not, I mean, gold is good, you know, for people, but going back to a gold currency is not happening, you know, but someone say, okay, I'm going to issue a currency, link it to gold and be an alternative to the dollar. And then Bitcoin is nice story, a lot of fanatics, but it's not playing out very well as a currency because it's too volatile, right? By definition, it's too volatile. So it's nice way to do a transaction. And a particularly legal transaction where you have all the records and the government can audit you. That's nice, but you cannot have it's not replacing. Okay, so we don't have yet an alternative to the dollar. Okay, and odds are if we don't have one now, things won't change. So the U.S. government is sort of abusing that privilege. You see, by saying, okay, we can print all we want. And who pays the price? You. You see, and let me tell you the problem of having, depending so much on a currency like the US. To give you an anecdote. In 1994, that's 26 years ago, there was a big rout in all emerging markets. And what happened? The US unexpectedly raised rates here, making the dollar more attractive. It did harm the stock market a little bit. It did harm the bond market a little bit, and that was it. A little bit. It caused the crisis in Mexico. It caused the crisis in Italy when they still had their lira. The bond markets collapsed worldwide, okay, based on the US, and then it was delayed reaction. Then you had Thai crisis and all that from the US raising rates here to attract elsewhere. So it means the following. We invariably, when you print money like that, invariably the first failure will show when you have to raise your rates. Because that you have a debt spiral, you see. And then you raise your rates, it makes your interest rates, your interest payment higher, and that will force you to borrow more. And then you raise rates. So that's how it happens, the spiral. But the problem is, the US the minute you raise rate, you won't cause a spiral for us here, it will cause a spiral for almost practically all other countries. That is the unfair situation now. Will that change? It will take a long time for structurally to change. And it's not because the US, because we spend $1 trillion on weapons and because we dominate the world, militarily. Switzerland dominated Europe. The Swiss currency was sort of like the reference currency in Europe before the euro. Now the Deutschmark, okay? Not the French franc, or the French was the militarily, French and UK were militarily dominant countries in Europe. But Switzerland had its currency dominating Europe, you see? So I would divorce the idea of saying, okay, no, it's because we have the weapons that this comes with it. That's not. It's not because of geopolitics. It's not because of anything. It so happened that is now the reference currency for a lot of commercial transactions, even those entailing the Eurozone. And for the switch to take place, I haven't seen a candidate that's capable of taking place. And so long as that doesn't happen, it allows the United States to make mistakes and make others pay for it.
Yeah. I have a question from Jayesh. Jayesh, I think you had some question. Raise your hand. Jayesh, he's the ex-Merrill person, and now he's running his own, manages his own money now in the market. Jayesh?
Okay, my question is that the negative interest rates, are these a black swan event or have they turned into a white swan?
Well, okay, I'm going to say something about negative interest rate. It's practically impossible to have negative interest rates.
Right.
So you can have slightly negative interest rates, okay, as a, like for example, when I opened an account at Citibank in 1985, they used to do something that's unusual elsewhere. They used to charge you $3 a month. Okay, that was the negative interest rate. It's the cost of having that money, right? So
Right.
it's the negative interest rates are not like you cannot have monstrously negative interest rates. You see, because it's sort of like if you have negative interest rates, you borrow and the borrower, the lender pays you interest. Okay.
Yeah.
You see, not the borrower. So you have arbitrage that can take. You can have what we call a friction, which is a cost of carry as funds, which correspond to the safety. Because the arbitrage would be, I get those currencies, I put them in a bunker, and I hire a private army, and that cost less than the negative interest rate, so I'm ahead. Now, of course, you're going to tell me that people can demonetize by switching to bank accounts. Okay, but India tried demonetization, okay, which allows for some. Europe tried, like Sweden tried. It doesn't work very well. And here, constitutionally, you cannot do it in America.
Okay.
You cannot, and not only that, but even there are laws banning a shop in the United States from, you see, the United States is a bottom-up sort of libertarian country, banning a shop from requiring you to pay in credit card.
Right. But with 1/3 of debt market, going at negative interest rates, where does this lead us? And especially, when I look from the perspective of risk versus return metric, I see that financial assets, whether it is gold or equities or bonds, the returns are coming off while the risk is going up because of the uncertainty.
Well,
how do you look at
I would say that the negative, let's say that negative interest rate means zero interest rates. Let's say, because really negative, you cannot, outside the situation I explained, where in Sweden or India, you demonetize a little bit. So if it's zero interest rates, that's a base, a risk-free rate. But then can you borrow at zero interest rate from the bank? No. All right. So these have translated. We've had that for a long time now, for about 11 years. What did that initially translate into? When the bank doesn't give you money, the government doesn't give you money, where did the money go to? Assets. Right. So it did fuel the big assets. So and one thing I've learned, just watch it, is that pretty much assets, early reactions are linked to interest rates. Late reactions, no. They get then it becomes sterile. Okay. Right. So assets. So what we had, the quantitative easing that Bernanke started, led to real estate prices going to the moon, speculatively. Things like so the first one to benefit usually is real estate, initially going to the moon. Luxury goods going to the moon. Stocks, of course, we had the big rallies and stuff like that. So this is where interest rates, because interest rates ban you when they're low from putting your money in cash. So you move to buying assets, whatever assets you can put your hands on, you buy them, okay, and eventually that leads to asset-based inflation, not goods-based inflation. So I think we'll have a second wave of that, okay, and we're seeing it. It's not that assets are rising, but look at the S&P. The S&P in March went down something like 14%. In April went up and almost the same, about a little more. I don't know the last day what it did, but pretty much that. Why? Because people rushed to assets initially. Now, is it good for the stock market long term? No, because you can lower interest rates only once. Once they hit zero, you can't lower them further. You see? So negative interest rate to me is like a storage cost for money. And so at zero interest rates, which is effectively what it is, allow you to zero interest rate, allow you to make mistakes, that you otherwise wouldn't. So it's going to push. And then the minute they raise rates, either because they have to, you see, they have to, and as the back months, interest rates start rising because the U.S. government is going to sell bonds. What happens? Everything that rose because of low interest rates gets punished.
Right.
You see, because when I buy land, when I buy something, I'm buying it for its earning powers.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just buying them because there's a way to store their money. If you're storing your money in something that doesn't give you yield, you're going to be punished.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Nassim, I think with your permission, can I take say last 3 questions if it's okay with you? Though we have many questions, but
here.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I think we have a question from Yash Bhutta. He's from a family office. Can you Shiv? Can you unmute him?
So my question is that how well do you think our central bankers are prepared to deal with the problem of inflation, which might arise if we are facing problems with our supply chains?
Okay, supply chain inflation is solved usually by supply chains. All right, so this is where, and it's not really inflation; it's sort of recovering the natural prices. And let me explain. We had a lot of products sold at $2 because people thought that with efficient supply chains, you don't have to pay too much for inventory, so you can lower your cost a little bit. And now they're paying back for the price because we have disruptions. So, and if you factor in the cost of disruption, the goods would go up a little bit. And that's not sort of like inflation. It's just a natural, people had, the price of these goods should have been different, okay, slightly different from what they were. So it's not so much a monetary policy. Monetary policy is completely ineffective for that. Monetary policy for interest rates typically is for inflation, anti-inflation is usually try to switch both expectation by agents. That's what Volcker did by squashing their idea to building in a pay rise all the time, or by in short term by raising rates, which I think something they're not conceived today, but the minute things get quiet, it will have to happen. So okay, to put things in perspective here, I think that the printing of money is monstrous, but it's still not the dramatic thing that has happened to our economy. Because if you think how much do they print? They can print up to 30% of GDP and be less than a cumulative, much less than a cumulative deficit they've had. So it's not, it's just like, Japan has 400% of GDP, and they print and they purchase their own bonds. Okay, so they, so 20, 30, 40% of GDP, that's not the point. The point is that the economy today is markedly different from before. Okay, there are deflationary forces in the economy that are vastly greater than that. So the hyperinflation or inflation will eventually show up, but not. We're not seeing any sign now. Assets that are being propped up, okay, are being propped up, preventively. Like I bought gold preventively. I'm not crazy about it. I'm not afraid of inflation. As a matter of fact, if anything, we have deflation. When you think of how much. Try to go by plane today and see, you see deflation. Try to buy a restaurant. Try to buy even we have deflation at the consumer level. We noticed one thing, and that was quite shocking. That farmers have been euthanizing their pigs and dumping milk. Okay, here. Now we would wonder, hey, why this excess now that we didn't have before? Well, it turned out that restaurants is a very inefficient way to eat. Okay, so they have so much. Okay, about half of the. I mean, it depends on where you are, but the restaurants, say equivalent New York City, it's like people eating the same calories. It's just that there was much less waste, and that definitely, and that's what people care about, is how much they pay at the store for a gallon of milk, all right? So we have some disruption in the meat industry, but that's temporary. But then again, people are consuming less calories, are wasting less calories. And that margin, okay, is causing practically deflation in farm products and farmland. And that structural difference, will they be there for a while? Because I don't think restaurants will go back to business as before. I can tell, I live in Atlanta now. I mean, I'm partly in Atlanta, and they authorize restaurants to open. And none of the restaurants where I used to eat is reopening. And as speak to a couple of owners and say, we're not going back to the industry.
No, there's a question from Ashish Aditya. He's the CFO of one of the largest BSF manufacturing company in the world. And Ashish, can you put your question?
Yeah, hi. So, Dr. Taleb, a question on what your view is on mean reversion, that world will always revert back to normalcy. There are only temporary disruptions due to these events, which will have few collateral damages. But, there's been 9/11, there has been this, there's been demonetization in India, but it may take some time, but it will always be a mean reversion.
I'd say I don't believe in mean reversion, simply because as a statistician, we say that a lot of people notice what comes back, they don't notice what doesn't come back, you see? So the telephone, this is like replaced by this, okay? That did not mean revert. What else did not mean revert? A lot of things did not mean revert. So I would say we have some long-lasting, so we have some long-lasting things coming from this that would be permanent. Or permanent, or at least, will take a while. And that long-lasting thing is the attitude towards the next pandemic, not this one, the next war. Like when you fight a war, then you build military for the next war, okay, knowing that, wars are an important thing in your activities. So what will come back is, I was saying that there's some businesses will come back. Hopefully barbers will come back. I need my Italian barber in New York, okay? And dentist will come back. But there's things that will not easily come back. I think the damage to universities is permanent. Not because they lost money, but because people suddenly discovered that Zoom is a thing that works sometimes for some things. And that margin is bad for, I think the Airbnb business, okay, will not come back in the same shape. People will not travel, will not commit to being in spaces for a long time, mostly because there is a collective paranoia that will build after this, and you cannot get rid of it very easily. But that something will revert, visibly. September 11 was interesting because September 11 was not a war, okay? September 11, and again, people thought that New York was doomed. I'm one of the people who said, and I live in New York, I said the day after September 11, New York was vastly safer than the day before. You see, because of the efforts, like after the day after a plane crash, flying is a lot safer. This is not the same. Okay, now we've discovered sources of risk in going to a bar, in going to your office, and riding public transportation. Public transportation will not recover. So the American South here doesn't suffer from COVID like New York because we don't have a super spreader public transportation. Now you may say that yeah, well, you know what? After this, but there are long-lasting changes. Like for example, a friend who worked for Goldman Sachs is working on having an office in the suburbs because they don't want their employees to always be under the risk in case there's a new pandemic, not this one, the next one, of being in a public transportation. Okay, in New York City, you could only access via public transportation, whereas the suburbs, you go by car. It's a car society. Car society are proving to be safer. For example, these will not be reverted easily.
Right. We have Dr. Sandeep Dadia as well here in line to ask a question to Nassim. I'm back, by the way. Had a bit of a technology.
Hi, Aisha.
Sandeep, go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Nassim. It was wonderful. So, what happens if there is a rapid deglobalization for manufacturing as well as the service industry, which I see it in certain parts and pockets of the world, and impact on the manufacturing or the service industries?
I think that that risk is low because nobody is irrational enough, okay, to completely want to manufacture something they can buy cheaper. American flags, yes, they'll be made here. Masks with the American flag, made in America, yes. Okay, but eyeglasses, not, you buy them where they make them. Globalization started with way before, bankrupted the Roman Empire. Okay, by the way, it was the Silk Road taking, their money. And it's not something you easily remove, okay? Globalization. So I think Yeah, you have some items, okay, and it'll be cosmetic, and I bet you it'll be cosmetic.
There's one question from Ishan as well. Student Ishan asking a question.
I'm a big fan of yours. I've read all your books. I keep reading them all over again. It was your the very first book, Fooled by Randomness, that in fact got me to participate in finance. And like become go into trading and investing. I have two very like short questions that I wanted clarity from you about. One is that I just read a graph yesterday that around $8.4 trillion of foreign debt is being owed by the emerging market economies. So what does that say in terms of like their capability or ability to return that debt, and how do they move about like going forward?
I mean, I'm less worried about emerging markets, to tell you honestly, than I am about emerged markets, right? So simply because when you think about it, if you look at the countries around the globe, hit to GDP to countries, the United States or England or the UK, is vastly greater than other so-called emerging markets. So I'm not that worried about emerging markets. You have to worry about the formerly emerged markets, okay? And how they're going to collapse. So the second point I'd say that all emerging markets are not non-elephant animals like one category. You know, they are varieties. Within these varieties, they're sovereign debt that's never good. Okay, whether times are good or bad, I don't like sovereign debt, but they're loans to industry, and a lot of loans to industry that some emerging markets will do better. So I'm less worried about emerging markets. I think the problem is at the core. The only problem, as I said earlier, to emerging markets come from the following. If we raise rates here, and then if and when, and believe me, it's not going to be tomorrow morning. You won't hear about it with your morning coffee, okay? It'll be a while. When we raise interest rates here, emerging market debt will suffer because interest rates will go to the moon elsewhere, and that hasn't been the tendency unless the United States, the US dollar ceases to be the reference currency.
Sure. We have one question from Amit Tandon as well from Proxy Firm. Amit, hi, evening. Ask your question, please.
I have actually two questions. One is, do you see the growth of China on the global stage as a risk, or do you see that this is an evolution of how the global powers shift between one economy and the other? The second is, of course, since you've been somewhat familiar with India, I just wanted to understand how would you play India after this pandemic? Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, the first, you have to now look at everybody's hurt. Some people hurt more than others, okay? China, the point is with growth, China is not China. China is some kind of symbiotic relationship with the United States and to a lesser extent Western Europe, you see, because it's it's sort of like it's one is one breathes, the other one inhales, the other exhales, and vice versa. So that's pretty much how I view China. I don't view China on its own. In other words, when China goes up, the others go up. And when the others go down, China goes down. So we can't really see, but nevertheless, China has been advancing technologically at a rapid pace. I'm not talking numbers, GDP stuff, expertise, technological expertise, papers in medicine coming out that have had a huge growth in the research sector. Okay. China, and at some point they'll contribute. But that's for them to start representing representing, like taking the economic power, and it would be a long time before that happens. Okay, largely because if they grow, someone else will have to grow as well. As to India, I'm not very familiar with the situation with India. Okay, but if you take current event, I don't think India is suffering as much relatively as Western countries. Okay, I don't think that they are suffering. So in a way, okay, you have a drop in GDP, but you had a very wise response. And you did not have the problems that we had in Italy and in UK. Or France, okay, well, France is still not out of the woods. So So India is, so relatively, economically, of course, you've taken a hit. Everybody's taken a hit. They've taken much less of a hit than other places.
You know, I have to ask you, Nassim, you've been talking about electric cars and as to how they're going to be the future. What was that spat of yours with Elon Musk on Twitter?
No, okay. So I believe in paranoia because it is a normal human reaction that I think if we have a reaction and we've had it for hundreds of millions of years, it means they get us out of trouble. And I always say, the first thing I do as a trader is learn to panic early. So, and Musk, with whom I had another spat over Tesla that I own myself. I love electric cars. I don't like Elon Musk. So, and you had to separate, you know, some, you know, as they say, extremes meet in Elon Musk. So there's one thing is he said it's stupid to panic over COVID. And at a time when only maybe 2 Americans had died or 5 Americans have died. So, and we had written a piece, my friends and I, warning people when there were 1,400 worldwide affected, now we're in the millions. Because saying it's a multiplicated growth, you have to worry about things that multiply. And pandemics are part of that class anyway. So, and I've always held the idea of panic early. And he gave me a gift by saying he said it's dumb to panic over Corona.
Yeah, he said the coronavirus panic is dumb. This was on May 7th. And then you responded saying calling it dumb is dumb. And then he blocked you on Twitter.
Say calling, he blocked, but say calling this dumb is dumb. So he blocked me also over a spat I had with him over the service to Tesla customers.
Okay, great.
So there was an antecedent to the story, and the other antecedent that I like the idea of panic early. Panic is only good if you panic early, not if you panic late, as they had to do to New York.
Absolutely. So I know you're bearish on aviation right now, but whenever the lockdowns get lifted, when is your next India visit?
Whenever I get invited, I mean, I love going to India, but I tell you, next time I want to speak some Hindi. I can manage words. Okay.
We can start now, Bala.
I myself have been learning despite living in India, Nassim.
Thank you.
As I think for want of time, maybe you want to ask the last question that you have with you. I think with that, we will come to a closure.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I just want to close in by asking Nassim, what are your own investments right now? Is there anything that you've bought afresh in this panic that has played out in the last 2 months?
Yeah, I bought stock in copper mines in a panic.
Mm-hmm.
I bought stock in copper mine. That's pretty much one thing, and I had some shorts in short assets that I covered, and that's about it. But so I have my powder dry, waiting for opportunities. I have a lot of my powder dry. I was short stocks going into this, so I reduced that, and I have some powder dry.
Okay. On that note,
But when I had also bought, incidentally, also bought gold and gold mines, also.
Yes, great. So gold, copper, and shorting, keeping
gold
some
mines,
powder dry.
gold mines,
gold mines.
Copper, not copper itself. Copper. So it was too destroyed.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much, Nassim, for taking the time out and patiently answering all the questions of all of our audiences here. It was a great pleasure. And hopefully next time we'll see you in person, not via Zoom. And a big thank you, Bala, to you as well for a very successful digital edition of Birla Voyage 2020.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Bala. And of course, thank you, Aditya, Birla, for this wonderful opportunity. And this wonderful, this is my morning, but you guys, it's late at night for you. What a great way to start a day as this. Thank you.
And what a great way to end.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.